to avoid this kind of protectionist environment. History has taught us that it never ended well.
And is this too early to talk about exit strategies for the world's major economies?
Certainly. It's important to discuss how we will organize the exit strategy in the future, because we need to prepare them. It's absolutely too early to implement it. I was very strong on this question during the meeting. Recovery is still very fragile in emerging countries, also in advanced economies, and we cannot take the risk of a double dip. So really, discussing about how the exit strategy will be organized is useful, of course, but not all the time to implement it. We will see this time will come only when we will be sure that unemployment is going to go downwards, we will be sure that recovery is secured.
And there seems to be a divide between Europe and the US and Japan on the issue of compensation for senior executives in the banking industry or the financial industry. But Secretary Gardner was saying that there will be a general outline, a proposal at the end of the year. But do you think compensation is just a symptom and not the root cause of the problem, or it is the problem?
I think compensation is an interesting index, and that's the one people in the street see. And it's absolutely unacceptable that when you have this crisis, when banks have been rescued by public money, you will have this huge income for some people, which it's not only an ethical problem, it's also an economic problem, because it induces those people to take risks that finally the whole society has to pay. Nevertheless, it's an index. More deeply, you have to change the capital requirements for the bank, the accounting system, topics which are less sexy than compensation.
And if we move on to some specific questions about the IMF, what do you think are the right percentage of voting rights for a country like China to better reflect China's status or prowess in global financial and economic community? Certainly not what Netherlands and Belgium added together.
Obviously, things has changed, and it's about time to change the different share of the countries in the IMF. China is the best example. Of course, the share of China has to increase, and to increase very significantly, and I hope it will be done. The other adjustments are not that big. Some countries need to be have a higher quota, some may have a lower quota, but that's small adjustment. The biggest adjustment, the biggest change is China, and we have to take this into account.
And some say international organizations like the IMF fail to adapt to the changes of the new environment. After all, they were created more than half a century ago to the realities back then, and over the years, IMF and some other organizations have not advanced with the time. So. And that's precisely the reason why we need to institutionalize the mechanism like G20 to be more efficient and to be more representative. How would you react to such comments?
It's absolutely true that during the 90s and the beginning of this century, the IMF has not adapted enough to the changing world. I think that during the last 2 years, IMF had changed very much, and that's exactly what is recognized today by the G20. When the G20 decided to go on organizing cooperation, economic coordination with the IMF at the center, as the center tool to do that. Of course, it needs realignment in the quota to be more legitimate. But having done this realignment, the IMF is going to become a kind of a machinery working behind the G20, providing the G20 with advice, with a forecast, with a policy recommendation. And I think that what you said about the IMF is totally true, but a bit outdated. Now we really change.
其实不只是卡恩在反对贸易保护主义，这次匹兹堡峰会也把反对贸易保护主义作为一个议题，但是最终呢却没有形成任何具体落实的细节。事实上呢，在全球经济逐渐进入复苏的同时，贸易保护主义也在随之抬头，而且还有愈演愈烈之势。
对，其实这个贸易保护主义它确实是一把双刃剑。那前不久呢，美国对中国轮胎实施的贸易保护主义措施，不仅仅是对中国的轮胎生产企业造成了伤害，同时也对美国自身产生了伤害。有人就担心，由于中美之间的贸易的不平衡，贸易保护主义会导致中美之间更多的贸易摩擦。
那么就这个中美贸易不平衡的问题呢，财经频道的前方记者在匹兹堡也做了一项调查。一位多年从事中美贸易问题的律师就提出了一个建议，他说，贸易不平衡的问题可以通过投资来解决。我们一起来听一下他是怎么说的。
It's a long time problem of the trade imbalance between China and the United States. So do you think the investment could resolve this issue?
I don't think that China can really control the exports out of the country. I think that is more based upon demand that comes from America or Europe. As the European and American economies are weak, exports from China are down.
翁国维，美国匹兹堡律师，专门从事投资、收购等业务，先后35次来到中国。对于中美贸易的不平衡问题，他认为完全可以通过投资来解决。
What I think the Chinese government needs to think about is not to encourage exports when the economies improve, but to encourage Chinese companies and Chinese investors to invest in companies and in joint ventures in the United States and Europe.
But this imbalance.
There was a very large trade imbalance between Japan and the United States in the 1980s and 1990s. That changed as the Japanese invested more in the United States. The important thing is that what China does not want is a political problem with the United States.
Yeah.
And I think in order to avoid the political problem, we need to create closer economic relations.
翁国维告诉我们，目前美国的能源、建筑、环保领域都有很多投资机会，中国公司大有可为。
China has a lot of chances, and because American economy is weak, I believe American companies are more open now to investing from Chinese companies than ever before.
这两天呢，有这样的几个热门词汇啊，像这个 G20 峰会、美国汽车工业基地匹兹堡、轮胎特保案。如果我们把这些热门词汇放在一起的话，我们不禁想问一问，奥巴马在这样一个时候对中国轮胎提高关税的真正原因到底是什么？
碰巧的是呢，美国钢铁工人工会的总部就在匹兹堡。在 G20 峰会期间，关于轮胎特保案的问题，我们记者也是采访到了美国新闻周刊的首席记者霍华德·凡曼，一起来听一下他的观点。
Well, if I can take an old phrase from American politics, all politics is local. The G20 summit was here in Pittsburgh. The headquarters of the United Steelworkers is here in Pittsburgh. And the steelworkers also represent the rubber workers union. So it was not lost on the union leaders here in Pittsburgh that Obama's administration made that decision right before the G20 summit. And it's also a way for Obama to talk to the base of his own Democratic Party and say, I'm with you on some of these things. Don't worry, union guys, I'm with you on that. However, we're going to tax your health care benefits as part of the health care reform plan. So yes, you're right. I think there's obviously American politics involved.
为了促进产业复苏，美国政府可谓无所不用其极。在经济危机下，受到影响的不仅是美国的汽车产业。由于汽车等终端市场的需求锐减，各种原材料的需求也都在下降。今年第二季度，由于铝需求下滑，美国铝业损失惨重。在 G20 峰会期间，对于美国铝业的前景，我们也采访了美国铝业集团。
Everybody, any economist, anybody who's looked at the market would tell you that the prospects for aluminum long term are very, very bright. Aluminum consumption is still projected to double by the year 2025. So that means more and more people are going to start using it. You're going to have more aluminum-intensive cars. You're going to have more aluminum in airplanes, more aluminum packaging. It's inevitable, and now it's just a matter of how do we work together.